Hi, everyone. How are you? Happy Saturday evening to you all. Our generation is at a crossroads now because many of our heroes from yesteryear, rock and roll heroes, pop music, whatever genre, even actors and actresses, um, they're falling by the wayside. And you know you're getting older when the singer who took over for the original lead singer now has passed. And can we slow the death train up?
Vinny is a man, always doing what he can, growing up tough. He knows how to be rough, but
It is rough. Our rock and roll legends dying off, dying. Hey, Rock, how are you? Hope you're doing well. Happy Saturday evening to you. Um, Dash Crofts, who Rock had told me about the other day, passed away, 87 years of age, part of the great Seals and Crofts, early 70s soft rock duo. Uh, Paul Diano in 2024, the original Iron Maiden vocalist. Um, Ozzy Osbourne last year, the Prince of Darkness, right? Brian Wilson, visionary leader. Hey, DJ, how are you, man? I haven't seen you in here. It's so good to see you. I hope you're doing well. I was thinking of you. I see you always comment on my shorts. Thank you so much. Uh, Phil Lesh, everyone, the Allman Brother, Dickie Betts, and you know, the legends naturally age as we do. It does seem that. Hey, Robert, how are you? It doesn't it seem that way now? Hey, Mitch. It used to be the 27 Club. Remember when we were younger? The 27 Club versus natural aging, whatever came first. Hendrix and Chaplin and all that. Uh, no distinguished elders. In fact, I think Mama Cass was about 32, and she was the older woman of the bunch that passed away. But many artists have farewell tours now. The Who, the song is over, and I was fortunate enough to see that at Jones Beach. It was wonderful. Their farewell tour in October 2025, and just you see other artists. Billy Joel, very ill with a brain disorder. In his, I guess Billy's just about 80 probably now. Elton, who has been on a it seemed like he was on a farewell tour for 3 years, but if you wanna hit every continent, I guess it would be 3 years. And I know someone, a friend of mine, Joe Whistler, he's an actor, and he was very, very close to Elton John for a while. And, he had told me that Elton is very ill, very badly diabetic. I didn't know that. But, everyone seems to be ill. And then you look at actors, Bruce Willis, just rounding 70, a dementia problem where there's a very good chance he won't know anyone shortly. 12 or whatever years ago it was, Robin Williams, who unfortunately committed suicide because he knew within 6 months to a year he wouldn't know anyone, and he was going on his own terms. And like Robin always did, he did. Yeah, it looks like he can hardly see either. Time is underrated, Robert. It certainly is. Time is a currency. Boy, if I could just buy some time, I don't know what I would do. Like most of us, okay, now what? But Paul McCartney just came out with a new song. I have to tell you, it's very Paul McCartney. His new album's coming out May 29th. I think it's very serviceable for an 83 years of age rocker who has lost his voice over the last 15 years. Um, it's very Paul now. If you're looking for another yesterday, go dust it off from your album rack or stream it and listen to it. But then again, in 1972, you were never getting another yesterday. Um, but McCartney, all the props, he has kind of found his voice now, which is a high register, not quite as gravelly and uh, gruff as his mid range is. And I'm sure there are songs on this newer album that have that mid range register, but this is a higher register and he gets through it. Um, it's an elder man trying to sing in a key that he probably shouldn't be singing in. Right, Rock. They don't. I will tell you, Joe Jackson, who was probably around 68 or 69, is coming out with a new CD. I hate to say album, it dates me. April 6th. I've heard a couple of songs off the album, and actually, it is good. It's very clever. And Joe Jackson is a clever artist. Give him that. He's very eclectic, and he's always stayed within the Joe Jackson comfort zone. Trixie's is a new CD that was released about 3 weeks ago. I think it was March 6th, actually. Squeeze. And it's climbing up in the charts in Britain. I think it was number 15 it opened up at, and it may be number 4 or 5 now. I'm not sure. I saw a report, but I don't know if it was an erroneous report for a big Squeeze fan like me who just wants to give them undue credit. But someone said they were like number 4 or 6 in the Brit album review. I don't know. But I will tell you, Trixie's is a very, very good album because you're seeing an album that was written in 1974 when Difford and Tilbrook were teenagers. They weren't good enough to play the music. Difford found the cassette tape, they redid all the songs and recorded them now. So you can see where the talent was going to go. And it's very interesting to be nostalgic with something that just came out. Yet it's over 50 years of age. But it's very good. It's very catchy. And Glenn Tilbrook's voice has aged very gracefully for a 68-year-old. He hasn't shredded it. And it's very sensible pop. And I think this Squeeze band, Squeeze was always Difford and Tilbrook with an interchangeable cast. For a couple of years, they had a very constant cast, but usually 1 or 2 members came in and out every 3 or 4 years. This Squeeze cast has about 6 or 7 members, including Chris and Glenn, but they're excellent. The only 2 that have been there for a while is the drummer and Stephen Lodge, who was the keyboard player, who was excellent. They've been with the new rendition of Squeeze for the last 12 or 13 years. There have been other bass players coming in and out and all that. Steve Smith, who was a guitarist, who's in there. Glenn was in a band, his own band, in the early 2000s called the Fluffers, and Stephen Lodge was in that band as well as the drummer. I love DJ. I'm so happy you're in here. I haven't seen you in quite a while. Hey, G, how are you? Yeah, Mick has a pacemaker. 2 years ago, they had to cancel the tour. And Keith Richards is really, really crippled with arthritic fingers. And I think that was some of him canceling the last tour. He probably has a very tough time playing now for large periods of time, in blocks of 2 or 3 hours. You have to remember when you're on tour, you're practicing quite a bit too. I remember when I was touring, you're just not going on the stage. You have sound check in the afternoon. You go through 4 or 5 songs for the engineer. You're reworking, so you're practicing. You're definitely working. Really, Robert? Lou Gramm? That's interesting. Tom Bailey came out with a CD about 5 years ago. I think it's called Science Fiction, the former lead singer of the Thompson Twins. I thought it was pretty good. It was very Tom Bailey, you know. Um, that music, I don't know, electronic is pretty big in Europe. I don't know if it's ever really taken shape here. That was someone that I forgot, Rock, but I was going to mention. Thank you for reminding me. Phil Collins, I give him so much credit. 2 years ago, their last tour, where he sat and sang, and he actually sang pretty well for a guy that is in that shape. He had had a surgery that went bad, and it deadened the nerves, so he has a drop foot, and he couldn't play the drums anymore. And it also hurt his hand, where he has a brace. He couldn't hold the mic. Uh, really sad, because Phil Collins, if you want to talk about the 80s, Phil Collins and Don Henley from rock bands were the two that you would talk about. And, Collins made a very successful jump from prog rock with Genesis, where when Hackett was in the band and when Peter Gabriel was the lead singer, they weren't all that popular. They had a cult following, but they weren't selling any records. Phil Collins brought them into the mainstream, really would turn it on again in 1980. And when he took over, their sound went a different way. He was very, very ear friendly. Phil Collins knew what the public wanted to hear, and he was into that. Really, I think his son's a drummer as well, Rock. But yeah, Phil Collins really knew how to tap in to what was going on in the 80s with electronic synthesized drum sound, the heavy drum sound, and the delay on the snare and all that. He was a master at it. In fact, George Harrison used to kind of make fun of him. I think he liked him, but he didn't like that music. George Harrison was a purist. Harrison did not like all that electronic stuff. He liked four guys playing conventional instruments. But everyone is getting older. Now, I've gone to see Squeeze over the last 5 years, probably 4 times. In fact, I saw them in Philadelphia at the Fillmore about a year and a half ago, saw them with Mitch about 4 years ago with Hall & Oates at Jones Beach. And they're still very good. But there's a big difference, my friends, of being 65 to 70 and being 80. I'll tell you why. I sing. I'm not putting myself in their class, but I had a good voice. I used to do Caramia. I could sing. I noticed the difference now. You always probably hear I have a hoarseness to my voice. Now I have a vocal cord that needs surgery. So I would blame a bit on that. But yeah, there's a big difference. Just look at Paul McCartney at 65, and then he's going to be 83 when he's 80. Tremendous difference. I love the Guess Who. I love them. They were very good. I saw the Doobie Brothers a few months back with Michael McDonald with them. Now, Michael McDonald, his voice isn't quite as strong as it used to be. It's still very good, but it doesn't have the strength. It's a little thin. Really, I'm going to check that out, G. Thank you. Sarah Collins. I'm going to check that out. Thank you. Genesis is a band that I never saw live. And I wish I had. You can even hear now Eric Clapton sounds different, but these guys are 80. Think about it. Think of your grandfather. If you were fortunate enough to have one at 80 years of age, sitting on the recliner, you serving him tea and getting crumbs all over his shirt. Imagine your grandfather being up touring. It's interesting. Yes, McDonald is very smooth, a thinner voice now. He's not as strong. I agree, Rob. Michael McDonald, I'll give you a story, Robert. I was very fortunate. I went to a fundraiser when I was a stockbroker. I had about an hour conversation with Steve Lukather from Toto. And in fact, when he left, who met him? Bobby Kimbrell and David Paish. They were outside in a limousine. Now, Rob, Steve Lukather was friends with Michael McDonald because Michael McDonald was an LA session musician. Michael McDonald was very close to Fagan from Steely Dan and was on a couple of their songs. Well, Steve Lukather, when Africa, they were the Toto was the backing band for Michael Jackson's Thriller. Steve Lukather was a hired gun. When he was 17 years of age in Toto, they used to lock him out of the studio because he became such a successful session guy. Everyone asked for Lukather, even at 17 years of age. He was taking work away from everybody. And Lukather had a handshake deal with Michael McDonald to be the lead singer of Toto. Got on the phone with David Paish, and Paish said, I just offered it to Bobby Kimbrell about an hour ago. And being stand-up guys, they gave it to Bobby Kimbrell. Originally, they wanted Michael McDonald, but they didn't want to do that to Kimbrell. And then Joey Williams was also a lead singer. Joey Williams' father, Joey Williams arranges now. Joey Williams' father did the Star Wars theme. Joey Williams' father was very big into background music for big movies. And Joey Williams is now doing it. And he's probably 66 years old. He's not too old. Lukather's about 68. Lukather went into Toto, like I said, when he was about 17 or 18. But that was an interesting story. And Lukather was wonderful. And Lukather said one of the funniest things. He said he was doing an interview and they were powdering his nose. And he said, look at this. Years ago, I used to powder the inside of my nose. He was very, very nice, Lukather. Very nice guy. And we were talking and he was telling me about George Harrison. George Harrison was living in LA and they were doing a benefit when Porcaro died, the drummer. And Lukather heard that George was there and wanted to meet him, went over to someone that knew George Harrison, and he said, I won't slobber all over him. Can you get me in to meet him? He went in. Hi, I'm Steve Lukather of Toto. And George said, oh, I've heard of you. You're great. And Lukather said, I don't want to be too forward, but we're doing a benefit for our brother. I think it was Jeff Porcaro. He said, and we're doing it here in a few weeks. We'd love you to come by if you'd like to come by. And sure enough, when they were doing it, they looked to the left and George Harrison was there. He showed up. And Lukather loved George Harrison. And in fact, the reason why Lukather was in Ringo's All-Star Band is because George recommended him to Ringo. George Harrison, if you were propped up by George, that was quite an endorsement because I don't think George really loved a lot of people. He loved Dylan. Anytime Dylan was in LA, George was living in LA in the 80s. He would go see him. He loved Dylan. He loved Tom Petty. He was good friends with Jeff Lynne, obviously. But he had his select guys. In fact, Lukather told me that he loved to talk music, Lukather, and I'm a drummer, so we were talking about writing and stuff. And he was telling me that when Roy Orbison died, Tom Petty said, why don't we use Elvis's voice, build a song, and then drop Elvis in? He thought it was a great idea, but then thought about it, thought it was cheesy. And then they used that technique, obviously, a few years later with the anthology. Now, I was told that George was given the original tapes from Yoko, not Paul. Yoko offered Elton John, and Elton said no. I bet you didn't know that. Yoko offered Elton John those tapes originally to work on the songs that John hadn't finished, and Elton said no. He didn't feel right. That's a true story. The last thing I remember in the early 2000s, Twiddly Dee and Twiddly Dum, I thought that was a pretty good song, actually. Around 2003 or 4, that came out. It was interesting. It was interesting. Bob Dylan can't sing. You go see Bob Dylan like you go see Paul McCartney now. Paul McCartney now, if you go see Paul McCartney, you're going to see a Beatle. It's kind of like when people went to see the Beatles in the 60s, you couldn't hear them. People were going to see the Beatles. They weren't going to hear the Beatles. You could hear the Beatles in your living room or with a good set of headphones on. You were going to see them. You wanted to see them. Well, people are going to see Paul McCartney. Miguel, they are CIA. I'm not sure what you mean. They are CIA? Yes, Robert, it's an event. Absolutely correct. I'm not sure what you mean, Miguel. They are CIA? Yeah, Bob's voice was never really good. But yeah, the 60s, the interesting thing with that, Miguel, I'm a teacher, continuing ed. And I wanted to do a course on the culture and the decade of the 60s because you had the civil riots, unrest, you had people getting shot and killed, right? Music, the British invasion and Vietnam and all that. I didn't have enough people. I have to have 12 people to sign on for the class, and I got 11. And then found out that I could have signed on to do it and would have got paid a little less money. And I should have, because I would have loved to taught that. That decade, you could never stop talking about the 60s. I don't know about that, Miguel. But listen, Miguel, anything is possible. I totally agree if you're telling me that anything is possible. Um, Look, yeah, well, rap. Yeah, the Beatles, the Doors. The drug culture was so prevalent in the 60s. And the thing is, I really think, Miguel, that artists in the 60s really started depending on taking drugs to write songs. Like I think John Lennon at one point felt he had to do LSD to be creative. I think artists got that way. I do. You come out with a hit under the influence of LSD, you're going to go there again if you feel that that's what got you creative, right? Well, that's another story. There's a lot of rumors that they didn't write. I don't believe that, Miguel. I've heard the rumors, the conspiracy theorists, that the Illuminati and all those people did it. I don't buy it. Although I will tell you, Miguel, if you're not a Beatle fan, I'm not saying you. I'm just saying, and you want to see how much product that they put out while they were on tour and putting out albums, it would be easy to think that way, Miguel, that like they had to have some help. No, I read about 5 books on that, and I listened to a couple of YouTube shows, and, Miguel, conspiracy theorists have a way of really when you're thinking about them and talking to them, you're convinced it's real, and then you hear another side and you're convinced it's real. No, I would say because, yeah, Paul McCartney's still writing, and he's been writing, for a very long time, and you would have heard something very substantial, not from some naysayers. Um, there was a black artist who claimed that he did all the drums for the Beatles and that he overdubbed all Ringo's stuff. And on his deathbed, he, well, yeah, I see what you're doing here, Miguel. You control all you want. I don't care. You seem like a cool guy. Uh, no, it's proven. It's not Billy Shears. It's not anything like that. It's William Campbell. It's not a guy that was in a Beatle cover band. The CIA did operations on him and they taught him to play left-handed. None of that. I'll tell you how I know. Because they did a voice print. Well, that's very possible, Robert. But the black guy, before he died, admitted to his daughter that most of it was bullshit. Go read that book. He admitted to his daughter that it was bullshit. Because I'm a drummer. And I could see the reverse rolls that Ringo does as a lefty playing on a righty kit. You can't replicate that if you're a righty drummer. You can't replicate it. Because 4 in the bar, you're going with the tom-tom first and you're coming over, you're a split second behind. I've done it in my mind. It's Ringo. Because I've recorded with drums. Billy Preston, all the great bands, Beatles, Stones, yeah, they're all getting old. But our legends are just wasting away. Yeah, Tony Sheridan wasn't Beatle music. It wasn't. They were the backing band for Tony Sheridan. Cry for a Shadow and all that stuff. I think that you look at these artists now, you go see the Spinners, right? And it's 2 nephews of 2 of the singers, a cousin of the singer. None of them are originals. But the music is so strong and they're so very good that you enjoy listening to the music. But the funny thing is, in the 1970s, bands from the 50s were considered oldie acts, right? You don't hear of Huey Lewis doesn't tour because he has a problem with his ear, but you don't hear of any of the bands from the 80s being dubbed now as oldie acts, right? But in the 70s, the oldies circuit, right, were the oldies, which were only 15 to 20 years old. Now you have bands that are 50 years old or older or more. You don't hear it's an oldie act. It's dubbed as The Who, right? Ringo Starr and his all-star band. He started that in 1988. It was a great idea. They put him on the map. He interchanged, and he's worked with many great artists that all were stars in their own right. Yeah, rock, and they're all considered oldie acts. You have acts that are around less time than The Who and they're dubbed an oldie act. So it depends where you fall. Yeah, Miguel, I tell you, I like Nirvana. I never knew much about Nirvana, Miguel, until I saw the MTV. It wasn't during the time it was broadcast. I think they did an MTV special where they did "Man Who Sold the World," the David Bowie song, and they did that amazing. But Nirvana was good. Yeah, Rob, the '80s rock has changed a great deal. The problem, Miguel, with rock now is you have producers that will put stuff out that they would never listen to at home. In the '80s, you were able to be whoever you wanted to be. You could be Cyndi Lauper, Grace Jones, production trends, right? Uh, Grace Jones. If you wanted proof that there's life on other planets, look at Grace Jones. You could do whatever you wanted. Nowadays, you put all the ingredients in a big pot, and out comes Timberlake and Grande and this one. There is a formulated plan on how to make a star now. Back in the '80s, you could do whatever you wanted. And I think that's because there was a second British invasion in the '80s. 20 years almost to the day that the Beatles invaded. You had Tears for Fears, the Thompson Twins, Duran Duran, right? Uh, great, great acts from Britain. Yes, everything is just homogenized. Very, very, great way to put it. I couldn't say it better, Rob. It's a money grab now, and they know what sells. And look, this started in the '90s. I'll tell you when it started. It started with Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera. That's when it started. When you could put a pretty 16-year-old up there, get all the guys to drool over her, all the girls to want to be her. And look at uh who's the chick now that's not Shania Twain. The big one now. That's worth $1 billion. Going out with Kelsey from Kansas City. She talks like she's in her mid-30s and she sings teen stuff, right? Who is it? The name, she's very big. Taylor Swift. Thanks, Rob. Taylor Swift sings about 17-year-old stuff. They still buy it. How old is she? 35? Eventually, it'll be like John Lennon in 1980 singing Can't Buy Me Love on stage. It'll look foolish. In another 10 years, when she's 45, Taylor Swift, it's going to look a little foolish talking about. I know Brian Setzer stopped playing Sexy in 17 when his daughter was turning 17. He felt funny. She's going to feel funny in her mid-40s talking about 17-year-old crushes. Just like the Beatles didn't want to do Can't Buy Me Love anymore. Well, She Loves You. They didn't want to do it 4 years later. Can you imagine 30 years later? Do you think John Lennon, if he were alive right now, would go up and go do Can't Buy Me Love? No. McCartney doesn't even do it because you feel stupid doing that stuff. That was one of the biggest songs the Beatles ever came out with. McCartney doesn't really do it much on stage anymore. It is bubblegum music. There was a big change around 95, Miguel. Absolutely correct, Miguel. Around 95, 96, Christina Aguilera, Britney Spears. Then you had Angela Bassett. You had other stuff going on. but Whitney now in the 90s was an adult. Whitney's in her 30s now in the 90s. But if you keep on selling, you're going to make the money. That was part of the reason why the Beatles changed so much, because the Beatles knew they were going to lose. You got to remember, in 1964, when you're 16 years of age and you got Paul McCartney's poster on your wall if you're a girl, in 1968, you're probably engaged. You don't have Paul's poster on your wall anymore. The Beatles knew that they were going to lose a certain demographic of their fan base, but they were going to pick up another demographic. They were going to lose the bubble gum chewing teenagers in 1968 or 67 with the head music. They knew they would, but those kids were getting older as well. And they made a decision. They just were big enough where they knew it really wouldn't hurt. And they gained a more sophisticated hippie culture. Because just think about it. Did you ever see The Clash? Were great, Rod. They were very, very good, The Clash. They don't get enough credit, The Clash. Did you ever see a bigger difference than The Summer of Love in 1967 and fast forward 1 year to 1968? You went from kids with beads on and pretty clean to unbathed, barefooted 1968. Guys didn't shave. They were filthy. They weren't taking baths. They all looked like hippies. They looked like different hippies in 1967. In 68, you had the drop out, turn on, tune in, or whatever Timothy Leary said. And it changed totally. I Want to Hold Your Hand, Miguel, right. Can you imagine John Lennon at 80 years of age singing that? If you notice, Paul McCartney doesn't do a lot of that stuff that got him where he is. Or if you want to call him Billy, as Miguel does, no one wants to hear it. But the problem is, when you're an artist now, when Paul McCartney says we're going to do a couple of songs off our new CD, that's when people run to the bathroom. People want to hear, Live and Let Die. They don't want to hear Jenny Wren from Chaos and Creation. People come because they want to see Beatle Paul. Make no mistake, okay? Peter will go see Paul McCartney. They're going to see Beatle Paul. They want Beatle Paul. They don't give a shit about Paul McCartney. They want Beatle Paul. Was Elvis before? Elvis was big in the 50s, went into the army, came out, and in 61 did his last concert near Pearl Harbor in Hawaii for 8 years until he did his special in 69 when he came back. From that time, all he did was make these movies. And Miguel, a lot of people feel that Elvis sold out. Now, I'll tell you what happened with Elvis, because I read a lot of books on music. Elvis was promised by a big director and producer, we're going to make all these Elvis movies, Girl Happy, all this nonsense. And we're going to save up enough money to put you in a production like Dr. Zhivago, where you are going to do a serious role and people are going to see you for who you are. It never came about. And he was heartbroken. But he thought he was working a few years for the studio to make enough money to put together an epic role for him where he would come out as a serious artist. And it never happened. And in the interim, Colonel Tom Parker stole most of his money because he wanted to fund it himself. He didn't have the money. That's why he came back in 69, because he wanted to try one more time. And he did a movie with Mary Tyler Moore, which was fairly serious. And Elvis was hoping that movie would launch him into a serious role, and it just never did. Because he did that movie just about the time he came out of retirement in 69. He thought that would be the stepping stone. They were what they were, Robert. You got to remember, when you have Elvis, you don't want the storyline to be that good. You want people listening to the music. That's just a way to get moviegoers to see who Elvis is. You see, Elvis had all of the 50s rockers, and then they had him in Jailhouse Rock in the late 50s, and you saw him. They wanted to garner the intelligent moviegoer, who they always thought were a step above teeny boppers. You got to remember, you don't have 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds going to serious movies. And if you do, you have more movie people. So they felt that they'd cross genre it and now get all the movie buffs to hear Elvis's music as well. And you grab both sides of the fence, music and theater. That's what they were doing. Really, Rock? I didn't know that. But yeah, Parker, they took him to the cleaners. Change of habit. Yeah, that was it. Hey, not that Mike, or know that Mike. Not that. You see, I'm like dyslexic. Yeah, that movie was intended for him to do something serious. They wanted him to showcase, and it just never came about. He was very jealous. I'll tell you why. Lord of the Rings. The Beatles wanted Lord of the Rings. Thank you, Miguel. I really appreciate that. The Beatles wanted Lord of the Rings. The writer refused to allow the Beatles to play in the movie. He had script approval. And they wanted the Beatles to do a serious film, and the Beatles wanted a serious film. They were looking around. The reason why the Beatles did Magical Mystery Tour was they had a 3-film contract. They had to honor it, and they got that to cover it. But what happened was the Beatles really wanted Lord of the Rings, and the writer turned them down. They were very disappointed in that. But the Beatles wanted to do a stage production. But yeah, Miguel, they wanted both. If you can cross genres, and I'll tell you exactly when that happened. Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton. Islands in the Stream became #1 on the Billboard Pop. Country went across genres on Billboard. And Kenny Rogers became a big star after that. And so did Dolly. Because Dolly did 9 to 5. They were inching her out of country. And I'll tell you why. Because back then, there was no money in country. The country charts, there was no money in country. Billboard Top 100. Pop is where the money is. Because there were very few country-dedicated channels in America, and they weren't going to play you on WABC in New York with a country song. If it was deemed pop, it would make the playlist. So they felt, let's get these country singers into the mainstream. And Kenny Rogers did it with Ruby and followed it up with that. Thank you, Miguel. Yeah, if you could press the like, I really appreciate it. Thank you, Miguel. I really appreciate it. But Really? Well, they were a bunch of sycophants. I always thought that the Beatles had it a lot easier than Elvis. I'll tell you why. Because the Beatles were the four of them. If Ringo got a bit of an ego or John, you know, get off your high horse. There were four of them. John could tell Paul, who the fuck do you think you are? Paul could tell John, that sucks, John. What are you doing? Who is going to tell Elvis that? Those four went through Beatlemania. And the four of them, but they weren't alone. Elvis was all alone. And I don't care. Look, I played in a band. I toured. We played for a few thousand people. No one knows what it's like. Now, I'm not comparing this to that because it's not fair. But army buddies, and by no way, shape, or form am I comparing myself and being in a band to someone that was in the army. That's a hero. I'm no hero. But what I'm saying is, when you're in the foxhole with someone, no one knows what it's like to be in a platoon unless you're in there. No one knows what it's like to be on stage. My tech guy who used to tune my guitars in the back, my guitar tech, roadies who set up the Rhodes and the Moog and all that, they don't know what it's like to be there playing. They get a feel for it, and they're a little closer to it maybe than you are listening, but they're not there. When I missed the count in because my drummer went on 3 because he was nervous rushing through. When I play a G7 and I throw the lead guitarist off, they're not there. We are. Do you know how many times I was on stage, and this is true, and I thought we were terrible, and someone would say, "You nailed it." If you would have asked the four of us when we were first getting off, how do you think that went? Oh, we sucked. It's a very funny thing playing music. What you believe. Music is like you bullshitting your friend that you had a 3-way last night with Cindy Crawford in 1985. You're selling it so much you think he believes it. He knows you're full of shit, but he's going, really? Yeah, because he doesn't want to embarrass you. Well, it's the same thing. When you're on the stage with guys, only you know that feeling. And that's what it was like for the Beatles. They were together. Colonel Tom Parker didn't know what it was like to be Elvis. The Memphis Mafia didn't know what it was like to be Elvis. Elvis knew what it was like to be Elvis. And I don't know where I'm going with this, but you understand what I'm saying. All the King's men, the truth about Elvis guy that were with him from school till the end. Really, I will. Let me write it. Let me tell you something I heard. I heard that Elvis was a very nice guy. I heard it from someone who knew Rick Mango. And said that Elvis was really a nice guy. And also a fairly ornery guy, Tom Jones. Tom Jones didn't take any shit. Tom Jones was a pretty tough guy. And he actually told John Lennon like he was going to beat the hell out of him because John Lennon had a weird sense of humor and they were on the same bill. And he said Elvis was a nice guy. Now, that being said, Elvis was jealous. He wanted the Beatles thrown out of America. He said it was because of the drug problem and that they were fostering drug use. No, I think he was jealous of them. I'll take a look at it. Thank you, Rock. Oh, let me write it down. I was going to write it down and I forgot. It's called All the King's Men. The Truth About Elvis. Thank you. I will. I certainly will. And Miguel, thank you so much for looking out for me with the likes. I really do appreciate that. That's very, very nice of you. I'm curious, how did you hear about this? Was it the silly short I made about I'm going on at 11 o'clock? Was that why you came in? Because it worked, I guess. That's why. But Yeah, sometimes I'm not entertaining. Maybe I'm not now, Miguel, but I try. But talking about the Squeeze album now, excellent. And it really sounds like them. See, now I'm going to let you hear. I'm going to lose my dollar I'd make here because I'm not going to be able to be monetized, but I don't care. You're my friends. I want you to hear it. The new Joe Jackson song, I happen to think is very good. Now, when you're coming out with a new album on Apple Music, every month they'll put like one of the songs out to let you hear it. And then they'll stop like at 3 and then you got to wait. Well, one of them, it's called Hope and Fury. One of them I think is about his life being gay and coming out. It's actually very catchy. It's about a guy coming out.
Billy grew up in the middle of everywhere. He never had a say. Billy wondered every weekend why he was doing there.
I'm going to do some reviews again, but listen to it.
Everything was grey. Then he looked at the rainbow flying on the shopping mall. After everyone said no, Billy had to have it all.
Gets up and out of the closet.
Can I be one? No, I accidentally tried to go back and I kept on knocking myself out of the studio. But that's one of the songs. It's about to be one of the fabulous people. He always felt out of touch and then found out who he was, which was a gay man. And Joe Jackson did come out of the closet a few years ago, not a young man when he did. And then there's another song that actually is really pretty good and it sounds like Joe Jackson. See, I'm an 80s monster, to be honest with you. So I like when the artist sounds like the artist. And there are certain guys with their voices that just they can't help it. They just sound like who they are. This is the other song called All This Time. Sounds very Joe Jackson. It's a crying shame.
His voice is the same.
What you did to me.
And I'll see if I can get to the middle for you.
If it's even true. It seems like breaking up is never hard to do.
Sounds like some of his later stuff. Howard Jones's voice. Yeah, I like Howard Jones. But yeah, Joe Jackson, I like him. I'm going to see him actually in July. I got tickets and they were expensive. I'm going to see him at the Beekman. Or was it Radio City? I forget. In July, I'm going. Have they, Robert? I like the Pretenders. Robbie McIntosh used to be in Paul McCartney's band, his traveling band. But I love them. I love them. I just think they're terrific.
The Pretenders are good. Middle of the road. I like that. See if I can get that one for you. The 808, what? The Roland drum machine 808, Miguel? Yeah, it gave you the heavy bass. Absolutely. I bet you Joe Jackson probably used the Roland 808. It's actually that's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, there's a Roland 808, and what it is it's a heavy, bassy kind of drum machine. Joe Jackson, Miguel, you'll love this. Joe Jackson showed how he made Stepping Out. And if you guys want to see it, it's incredible. He was in concert. And he explained, and he took the old drum machine that he used to write the song. I'll show you.
Rhythm 55.
That's the original drum machine. On stage, I'll show you how he did it.
So it's bloody ancient. You know? It's a priceless, rare antique.
Watch this.
But it's still good. Kind of like us.
He replicates the whole song, how he
So
did
we're going
it.
to plug that in, and we hope it still works. Just be very careful, because it's the only one. You can't get these. I'm telling you. There's one in a zoo somewhere. Actually, there's one in the Museum of Natural History, I think. Maybe just the skeleton. Anyway, as I was saying, the other survivor from that album is that this instrument was also used on the album. Graham is going to play the glockenspiel.
He replicates how he wrote the song.
And to round it off, Teddy is going to play the organ part. The first thing we have to do is make sure the drum machine works. One of these days. Now we have to bring the bass in. And that is a synthesizer that was programmed, which, if we could do that in 1982, we can certainly do it now. So, ladies and gentlemen, Doug's laptop. The only thing the drummer did on this record was just plug in the snare drum, like so. Get the exact same place. Next we're going to add, Doug, it's okay if we hit a cymbal once or twice in the song. Not now. Okay, we're going to add a layer of organ and electric piano.
Great song in the early 80s. I remember that came out with Breaking Us in Two. Those are two really good. 82? Was it 82 or 83? But yeah. So our rock and roll legends are dying. It's up to idiots like me who have nothing better to do on a Saturday night than to explain it. And to you wonderful people who take pity on me and say, let me give him a view. And they watch me. So Miguel and Rock and Mitch and DJ and all of you, thank you so much for watching me. I really do appreciate it. Now, is rock and roll dying?
Well, to me, it's getting older. But so am I. So we're even. But as long as I can still hear, I will still be listening. And I'm sure you will too. Thanks, everybody, so much. I really do appreciate it. Have a great, great Sunday. Okay? And I'll see you guys soon.